Hello, Jim. We are very happy and honored to have you join for the German Precious Metals Conference, Edelmetallmesse 2021 edition. Thank you so much for your time, for making us time. You're in Singapore, correct?
I am in Singapore, yes. It's 5 in the afternoon here. Yes, I am in Singapore.
Great, perfect. How are you doing?
Fine. I mean, well, it's hard to travel. Everything is locked down, most of the world. But other than that, I'm so far so good.
Do you at least see an improving trend a little bit for COVID or for the traveling, or has it been tough still?
Well, yeah. Well, Singapore goes up and down, up and down. They change their mind quite a lot. At the moment, it's very difficult to do anything in Singapore, but it's certainly better than it has been. And all over the world, you know. I'm not in lockdown. I'm not in quarantine. I'm sitting here talking to you from my own home, my own office. So that's great.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our first question. I mean, we really respect your experience and advice that you could give. And you started working in Wall Street already in the 60s, and you worked through all the 70s with a stagflationary period. And there's a saying that history doesn't rhyme, it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So do you see any similarities between the 70s and now? And how did it feel like back then? And how does it feel now for you?
Well, back then, of course, we started having gigantic money printing, debt, because of the Vietnamese War is what started it, but it kept going in the United States. And we had shortages, supply and demand got out of whack for many raw materials, many commodities, including gold and silver for historic reasons. So we had a lot of inflation, high interest rates, bad markets, et cetera. I would suspect we're certainly starting to have inflation again, lots of money printing, much more borrowing now, much more spending now than then. And so I would suspect that things are going to get pretty bad. In those days, we had a big bull market in the 60s. In fact, a bubble at the end of the 60s. We're probably we're starting to have a bubble now in some asset. So I suspect we'll have a bubble, then we'll have a big collapse. We'll have money printing, inflation, debt, and problems. I would suspect, Wolfgang, the next time we have a bear market, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime. And I say that because in 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Well, since then, Wolfgang, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. Even China now has a lot of debt. So the next bear market is going to be terrible.
Yeah, and already now, still now, supposedly we're recovering from COVID, and for example, the US, they're printing money like it's going out of style, and the trade deficits are at record highs. But so what I'm curious about, I mean, the US is really basically printing money and importing real goods for the money. How long do you think will it take until, for example, China says we will not give you any more real products for your paper money? Of course, I exaggerate with this question, but it's right now it's still accepted, although the trade deficits are above minus 73 billion already per month.
Well, I'm not sure you exaggerate. You know, you ask about the 70s. 100 years ago, Britain was the #1 country in the world. There was no #2. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, et cetera, et cetera. 50 years later, in the 70s, Britain went bankrupt and nobody would take their money. So don't say it cannot happen again. It happened in 50 years, in less than a lifetime, because they made many mistakes. They printed a lot of money, et cetera. The United States is probably making a lot of mistakes now. They're certainly printing a lot of money, borrowing a lot of money. Same thing the British did at one time. The US is now the #1 country in the world and the world's reserve currency, but it didn't take long for the British to change. And it certainly can happen and will happen to the US. I still own assets in the US, including US dollars, but you ask about the 70s, That's what happened in the 70s, and it certainly can happen in the next decade. There's no question about that. But at the moment, people still use the US dollar. I own the US dollar. So I haven't given up on the US dollar yet.
Oh, good to hear, at least. Well, it will maybe be more gradual than sudden, but yeah. So you're not in the dollar bear camp, or do you think that the dollar, the Dixie, for example, will go down, or it's probably more complicated than that?
It's always more complicated than that, Wolfgang. If you've been around the markets, you know it's always more complicated than that. Well, I own the US dollar now because when turmoil comes, people look for a safe haven. Now, many people think the US dollar is a safe haven. It's not, but people think it is for historic reasons. So when the next big problem comes, the dollar will go higher, it will get overvalued, and I hope I'm smart enough to sell my US dollars because that may be the last bit. I would suspect that then the US dollar will go down for a while and maybe for who knows, for a very, very long time, just like the pound sterling did. But I don't know where I'm going. Your next question should be, well, what are you going to replace the dollar with? And I don't know at the moment. That's a very, very good question, which I will have to deal with when the dollar gets overpriced.
Yeah, it's sort of, this is the real challenge now, because we had countries going into devaluation of their currency or even hyperinflation, Argentina, Venezuela, and so on. And we even had countries that came out of it, and they always sort of backed their currency or they linked it to the dollar. So now what happens, what can the dollar link it to? And then of course, there are some people in the gold camp that say it must be linked to gold. But this is uncharted territory to go back on a gold standard, isn't it?
Well, the world has tried the gold standard a few times in history. It's never worked for long for many, many, many reasons. And that's why we don't have the gold standard now, because it always leads to more problems. But I mean, I do own gold. I don't think I don't own gold. And I will certainly buy more somewhere along the line. Doubt if the world will try the gold standard again, just because it causes problems for politicians. I mean, the gold standard is tough, and politicians don't like anything that's tough. I don't know what will replace the US dollar or even compete with the US dollar. Several countries now, China, Russia, India, Brazil, several countries are trying to come up with a competitor to the US dollar because we need it. The world needs a competitor to the US dollar, and something will come up. I hope I'm smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah, but gold still is a good asset, no matter what if there would be a gold standard or no, isn't it? I mean, the central banks still hold a lot of gold. The central banks in the East have added a lot of gold. Actually, and the Western central banks have maybe reduced their gold holdings or had them stable. What do you think? Which ones are smarter of the central banks? Do you think they should be adding gold to their reserves, the central banks?
Well, as I said, I'm going to be buying more gold somewhere along the line. I hope I'm smarter than central banks. I hope all of us are smarter than central banks. They're not very smart people in most central banks, but I do plan to buy more gold and probably silver. If I were buying today, I would buy silver, just because silver is cheaper today on a historic basis than gold. But I hope I'm smart enough to buy more of both somewhere along the line.
Of course,
Wolfgang, I'm an old peasant, and all of us old peasants know that when things go wrong, we want some gold in the closet. We want some silver under the bed, because we know that's the only thing that's going to save us.
Yes, totally agree. And
in Switzerland, all the old peasants in Switzerland know they better have some gold and silver.
Absolutely, and it's actually, people don't talk about it so much. I even have I talked to investors recently and they were actually quite bearish on gold, and they kept talking negatively about it. And later I found out they have a huge gold position in their fund. they just have it. I mean, I think 10. So basically, I mean, historically, 10% people say is a good position to have in normal times. Do you think? Of course, you can't give investment advice, but maybe on this video interview. But what do you think would be a good position to hold in these more crazy times than that we are facing now? Is 10% a good percentage, or?
It depends on what you know. If you know a lot about gold and silver, maybe 100% should be what you own. If you don't know anything about gold and silver, you should not own much gold and silver. Everybody should own a little bit as an insurance policy. If nothing else, you hope you never need your gold and silver. But if you need it, you're glad you have it. So yes, everybody should have a little bit. And then it depends on how much you know. How knowledgeable you are. I don't know how much I will own eventually, but I know it's going to be more than I own now.
Excellent. Yeah, and you already touched upon silver. What's your opinion on silver as a diversification or as additional precious metal? You mentioned the gold-silver ratio, or it's historically undervalued. If gold has a nice run, we could expect silver going up even more, maybe?
Well, silver is down 60% from its all-time high. Gold is down 10% from its all-time high. So on a historic basis anyway, silver is cheaper. It doesn't mean anything, but it does mean that it is cheaper historically. So that is why I would probably buy more silver than gold. Silver does have many new uses, solar energy, electric cars will use more silver. You know, silver has many uses, not just a nice thing to look at. So I will probably I will buy more of both eventually, but probably more silver if the prices were the same ratio as today.
Yeah, and plus the all-time high was early 80s, where it was, what was it, $60 or so? $60 in the early 80s was something different than $60 are now. So
it was actually 50
US
yeah,
dollars. In 1981, right?
It's been 50 US dollars twice in the past 40 years. And I would suspect it's going to go to $50 again before this is over.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, and instead of like physical holdings, do you own any mining shares? Do you think that's also a good, of course, if you're experienced, if you have knowledge in the sector, mining shares, of course, can also be interesting, or silver, gold, mining shares?
Again, Wolfgang, if you know what you're doing, yes, but there are hundreds of gold mines and silver mines in the world. There was a famous American writer once who said the definition of a gold mine is a hole in the ground with a liar standing at the top of the hole. He obviously lost a lot of money in a gold mine. If you know a company which is going to find gold in Berlin, please buy all you can and then send me an email. I want to buy it too. But there are hundreds of, I own, I think, one or two, but you know, futures are a good way for people who know what they're doing. Physical is a good way. Depends on what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So can I ask you about your travel? You have done 2 famous trips around the world. This is a book from your second trip around the world, Adventure Capitalist. And I imagine if you visited more than 110 countries, I think 116 it was, if I remember correctly, on this second trip. What would you recommend people nowadays do? Because people are more and more just sitting at home or on their smartphone. Shouldn't they also go out and meet people and see the real world like you did? Maybe they don't have the means to travel 3 years around the world, but they could. What would you recommend to young people now, what they should do to?
I would strongly urge all young people, especially, but everybody, to see some of the world if you can. You will learn more about your own country if you see the rest of the world. You will learn more about yourself if you see it's a fantastic education to have to travel by yourself and cross a border in the desert or in the jungle or something. No, it will teach you a lot about the world, teach you that most of the things that you have been taught are wrong about the world. You will also find that most people are not dangerous. You know, we're all afraid of each other because politicians say they're terrible people. They're not terrible people. So I would strongly, and you don't have to go to five-star hotels. You can hitchhike, you can take the bus. There are many, many ways to travel. I urge everybody to do it. And it will be a fantastic education. You can always go back to your own country. I'm not saying don't go home. No, if you are German and you see the world for a couple of years, you can still go back to Germany if you want to, but maybe you want to go somewhere else. You know, millions of people in the world started in another country. Their families started in another country.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great advice. I consider myself also still young. I'm 46 years old, but I still have to do more traveling in the future. And I also find it's fantastic experience to meet people and talk to them rather than being in front of the screen and thinking about theories. So
and thinking about government propaganda, because no matter where you live, there's government propaganda that's telling you things about other countries, and it's probably not right. Go out there and find out for yourself.
And they're not really practitioners normally, the government. I mean, here in Switzerland, actually, it's where I am currently, most of the politicians have a full-time job and they are just part-time politicians. But for example, in Germany, most politicians are career politicians. They come out of university and they do nothing else than politics. They've never worked, they've never earned money from a company, they've never run a company. It's really they're in theory, in their theoretic world. So yeah, their advice cannot be so good. Yeah.
That's one of the problems in the world. Many politicians in the world are full-time politicians. They don't know anything about the real world or the rest of the world or even their own country, because all they've ever done is go to school and go to politics. You're exactly right, but that's the way the world is, and we have to understand that, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah. So let's hope traveling will be easier again soon, and we get out of this COVID pandemic sometime soon. And from the German Precious Metals Fair, we would really love to have you as a speaker in the future when it's a physical event again. And yeah, we hope to see you around in Munich, maybe in 2022. That would be great.
I would be very, very, very keen. I love Munich. I love Germany. I love gold and silver. So, yes,
have you been to Munich, or have you been to Munich?
Many times, yes. Well, I've been to the Hofbrauhaus many times. No, I've been to Munich often.
Excellent. Yeah, the Oktoberfest got canceled again this year. So this is a big blow for all the people in Munich, because this is a very, very important event, of course. But yeah, we really hope that it will come back, and we hope to welcome you as a speaker at the physical event, maybe in 2022. And we thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best to Singapore. And yeah, speak to you soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you very much. Let's do it again sometime. I hope to see you next year.
Thank you so much, Jim. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.